You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics, lots of public policy, lots of criminal law, because today's show, in large part, is about Rod Blagojevich, the second governor, in recent years to be indicted in the state of Illinois. They kind of had a string there with George Ryan, now doing time, doing 6.5 years in Terre Haute, Indiana. And so December 9th, 2008, Rod Blagojevich arrested and then indicted later in the spring, tried in the, summer of 2010?
Last summer.
And as everybody knows, he got basically a hung jury on 23 counts, the 24th count lying to the FBI. They did get him on. He is now a convicted felon, looking at 1 to 5 years. That sentencing by Judge Zagel will be after this trial, which is the trial that we're taping the show on May 28, 2011. And the first day of trial was May 2nd, May 3rd, something like that?
No, actually jury selection started a little bit earlier.
So it was
late April. Right.
And of course, we're speaking here with Paul Meincke. He's the ABC, I should say, he says he's a general assignment reporter, and I guess that's accurate, but he does a lot on courts, right?
Yes, we have governors who've been in trouble, and I've been able to cover George Ryan and the first Blagojevich trial.
Paul's been developing a specialty here on indicted governors, especially indicted governors from the state of Illinois, convicted governors. You've now had 2 Illinois governors convicted.
That's correct, yeah.
So we'll be spending most of the time on that, but we'll maybe get into a little bit of the politics and the public policy that's going on with the city of Chicago, with the state of Illinois. And so this stuff has broad application. Public corruption is not really unique to Illinois. I mean, it's one of the 3 worst states, people often say, right? New Jersey, Louisiana, Illinois.
The local FBI office has a squad that's devoted to public corruption. And the amount of time invested in public corruption in this locality, in Chicago generally, exceeds most other states. So Rob Grant, the agent in charge when Blagojevich was indicted, was asked the question, how corrupt are we? And he said, if we're not at the top of the list, we're certainly right up there.
All right. And let's get right to it, Paul. It's an easy question. Is Rod Blagojevich guilty?
He's got problems. I said that the first time around. He's got real problems. But if he has the ability to win over one juror, he comes out the same way he did in the first trial. That lying to the FBI count, convicted on that, that's not in the mix now. So how's that for skating your question?
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be a short show if you answered it yes or no. As the judge often says to Rod these days, you can answer that with a yes or no.
Yes.
Rod, as you know, and everybody's heard about this, Rod is being particularly loquacious and verbose, even more so than when he was just a politician running for office way back in 2002. Our regular guests would remember and know that Rod was here. Actually, not right on this set, but we did put him on Public Affairs in 2002 when he was running in the Democratic primary. Typical Rod, was supposed to be on our set, and we got a call. He was supposed to be taping at 8 o'clock, around 9:30. His handler said, we're on the far south side of Chicago. We're probably not going to make it to Winnetka by 8 o'clock, since it was 9:30 then. But to his credit, he came out and gave us an interview at the Nutrier Democratic Organization endorsement session.
He was notable during his political campaign for his tardiness. He was not often on time.
Right. But anyway, to give the guy credit, 40-minute interview, cut it down to 30 minutes, didn't walk away at all. So it's harder to walk away from the interview here when you're on the set. So if I say something defensive to you, Paul, you're going to have to look kind of odd. But truly, he could have walked away. There was no set there. Right. But he didn't. He answered questions about what we thought were terrible things like John Porter's Boil. Remember those?
Sure.
And so the man is a charmer.
He is. He is. He has an ability when he was convicted by the Senate, he went to the podium. He didn't have a note in front of him. And he spoke for 45 minutes. And even those, and everybody voted to convict afterwards, but even those who were quite critical of him said that was a remarkable speech. It was a fabulous speech, full of baloney, but a tremendous speech.
Right, even thought, was it after his conviction he said it wasn't such a bad day?
Yeah, I mean, not such a bad day. Then he came back home. We're all in Springfield covering it. And we have people lined up ready to opine about what just happened on that historic day. And the governor came out of his house. He'd already lost his security detail. He walks out, had an impromptu news conference, and then wandered the neighborhood. And you know what he did? He took over the entire 6 o'clock broadcast that night. Took over the whole thing. He's a master at that.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to our question. Is he
Okay.
guilty? Rod Blagojevich, yes or no? Will he be? Let's make a prediction. I won't ask you whether you really think he's guilty, but if you've seen a lot of trials, you've done court work, you covered this for ABC, 25 years at ABC, right? A little bit longer when we count some of your prior work going back to Rock Island, right? As a sports guy.
Right, sports guy.
You know this stuff. Is he gonna? Your prediction, Paul Meincke, is Rod Blagojevich going to be found guilty in his second trial of a significant number?
Let me just say
counts?
this as a qualifier. I said in the first trial I thought he'd be found guilty, and he was on one count. Everything else was hung. So the answer to the question is yes, I think he'll be found guilty.
Of at least several counts.
Yes. I don't know about all of them. There are some of them that are a little flimsy. The racetrack thing is, I'm not sure. The construction thing, the tollway thing, maybe not. The Senate seat is a problem for him. The tapes are very powerful. And unlike the first trial, these tapes came in rapid fire. And the prosecution listened and wisely condensed, streamlined. They went right for the jugular.
And rapid fire, the plaintiff's case after the jury selection, after the opening statements, the government's case, 11 days of trial testimony, and not all full days.
Right.
But that was much faster, at least half or less of the first trial.
Half the time. And these tapes came just one after another. In the first trial, they were spread out. In the first trial, there were some tapes that happened late in December of '08 with the governor's brother. It was hard, I think, for the jury to make the connection because they didn't get this in a chronological fashion. They got a piece here, a piece here. Here's a name, Meincke. Who is this guy? Then other witnesses came in. They brought them in, as they always do, and put them on the stand. But you're talking about with Meincke, the first witness and one of the last in this trial, you've got to cover a lot of ground, and it's not chronologically presented, and people are not getting A, B, C, D. They got this big morass, and it was hard to figure out.
And that's what the closing arguments are for, to bring everything together, to
Make it
argue
make
the
sense.
case. But still, you'd like to see the story told as in the trial,
Right.
with some sense, some understanding. It was a tougher case because the government was alleging too much, in a sense, perhaps more than was needed to, if their purpose is to take a guy. Look, if the U.S. Attorney's Office is trying to do justice, truly they should be, they look at some things, they find there's not sufficient credible evidence there to convict, they walk away. They're not trying to give people a tough time. Number one, is that right? Do you believe that? They're trying to do justice when they think there's really a guy who did bad things. They're going to try to put him away. Somebody else they look at, they do the investigation. We don't think so much. There's not so much here. We're not going to give this guy a tough time.
Yeah,
is that right? Do you think the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yeah,
right?
they think that this guy did bad things, and they threw the kitchen sink at him.
Okay.
They threw everything
Too
at
much.
him.
The whole criminal enterprise. It might have been true, might not have, but Chris Kelly, Rod Blagojevich, Tony Resco.
Right.
Who am I leaving out? Who's it?
Lon Meincke.
Lon Meincke. Those four guys had a
They were the
criminal
four.
enterprise. The gang of four.
Yeah, the gang of four. And in the first trial, they even got to the business of saying when they met on a couple of occasions, they had a number, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how the first trial began. That is not how this trial began. In fact, 1, 2, 3, 4 isn't even part of this trial.
And the whole idea there, they said that the gang of four met, they decided we were going to run state government to make money,
Yeah.
and we'll divide it all up at the end.
Right.
Like guys who go to rob a bank, and then they run off to a city, they're going to Mexico, and on the way they stop somewhere, they divide up the money, and then they go their separate ways.
Right, and they
Really,
were
that
gonna-
was the impression they were trying
Well-
to get. I'm not saying Rod did this, I'm just saying that was the U.S. Attorney's portrayal of this
This was the
criminal enterprise.
This was the underlying. This is part of racketeering. This was
Right.
the basis for that. And the second charge, which was conspiracy, we are going to use our positions of power, state. We're going to take state action to make money for ourselves. And when Rod is done, we're going to have salted away that kitty, and then we're going to divide it up, and we'll run off to wherever.
And, of course, to remind people who these folks are, Tony Resco, well, he was Mr. Wheeler Dealer in Illinois politics, going back to a long time, but I know in 1991, when Barack Obama, now President of the United States, former U.S. Senator, former state senator at that time, 1990, I'm getting this right, actually. Actually, I'm not. When was the year that I'm just thinking out loud here? Actually, it was 1991.
91?
Because that was Barack Obama graduated from Harvard Law School, president of Harvard Law Review, comes out to Chicago, was interviewing for jobs. Who should offer a job to Barack Obama, but
Resco.
Tony Resco. Legit. It means a law firm.
Right.
Going to work there. And, or well, I don't know if it's a law firm, but doing something.
Right. Yeah, well, he's the
Housing
money
or
man.
whatever.
He had
He's
an
the
ability to raise money.
So Tony would go to everybody and become friends if he thought they would be helpful in the future. He'd somehow try to get money to him now. They would be indebted to him. I'm not saying he did anything wrong with Barack at that time, but that's an example of Resco seeing what Barack Obama was and who he was going to be. He didn't miss a beat.
Right.
How many people in Chicago could say who were wheeler dealers, they went out in 1991 and offered a deal to Barack Obama?
Not many.
Not many. But, so that's Mr. Resco, who's now doing time himself, right?
Well, yeah, he's in the Metropolitan Correctional Center. He has not yet been formally sentenced. He waits in the wings for the possibility, which many of us think is remote, that he would be called as a rebuttal witness in this trial.
He's cooperating with the government.
He is.
He hopes he's cooperating enough so they will reduce his sentence.
Right. He's cooperating, but he has written a letter. He did write a letter to the judge saying he's being forced to say things that he really didn't mean. Now, that was early on. So his attorney has said that he is prepared to testify for whoever calls him.
Okay. So Resco basically is out of this case. He may have been mentioned once or twice, but
Yeah,
so far.
Well, even the Judge Zagel said in the first trial that whichever side chooses to call him, this witness will be toxic.
Right. He hurts whoever calls him. He's the kind of witness who hurts whoever calls him.
Right.
Do you say that in the presence of a jury, the jury?
No.
Okay. But still, it's kind of an odd thing for a judge to say. Don't you think it's just a little stronger? I mean, judges are supposed to be, they're neutral, right?
They're supposed to be neutral, yes.
All right. So that from that smile, I'm taking it is Judge Zagel neutral in this case?
I think he's following the law. He doesn't want to make a mistake. Okay. I think he's following the law. I think he probably has some pretty pronounced opinions. I would say this, he's made pretty clear away from the jury that he was not happy with the way the first trial team worked for Blagojevich. And after the fact, Sam Adam, the younger Sam, in the press conference immediately following the verdict, said, and we really got rolling. He was really rolling. And he said, if someone thinks I'm talking to the next jury now, I am talking to the next jury now. The judge did not appreciate that. That's one of the few things he said he saw, and he said it was improper for him to do that. There have been, he's given almost law school class lectures. You don't understand how it works here. He hasn't said that, but he will say, why don't you try this? Are you sure this tape is going to benefit you? It's almost like he's instructing the defense. This is the way you
trying to help him, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know.
It may sound like that.
I don't know.
Or is he being condescending and saying, you guys don't know what the hell you're doing?
It depends on how you want to read it. Yeah. I mean, that's what we wonder. How does the jury, all those objections, the prosecution is concerned because they look like ogres. They keep getting up to object, but they're objecting based on the law. And the jury is sitting back and we're wondering, well, maybe they're concluding, and this is a prosecutorial concern, maybe they're concluding that these guys are just trying to muzzle up the defense side.
And indeed, the government was worried about that. One witness to 150 objections, another witness 143, according to the count.
You counted. Yes.
I haven't counted. I'm relying on reliable sources. I don't know. The other Chicago media people here.
Right.
That's my reliable source.
Well, you're in the ballpark because we were reduced to doing slash marks.
Right.
Yeah.
So with all those objections, you're right. And then the government at some point, I thought maybe too late, halfway, 2/3 through the trial, complained to the judge about that, about arguing during cross. Cross is supposed to be for questioning the witness, but not making your argument. But they've complained that's what the defendants are doing, and they said, and also those questions that are being objected to, government said they looked at the jurors, they seemed to be taking detailed notes of the questions because the judge was sustaining the objection, the witness usually before the witness answered. So what are they taking notes of? They're taking notes of the question that the defense counsel were asking on cross, and they said, you'd be able to tell the jury that question is not evidence.
Sure, when they go back into
and he
the
did
jury
that.
room,
He told the jurors that.
He did.
But
if you have a notebook and you go back and you've written down what's been objected to, and then you write down perhaps objection, you're in the jury room and you're saying, look, he was objected to. Objection. What is this?
And then they're hiding it. And also the government said, we want to explain to them that it's our job to make objections when proper, and we're not doing anything wrong. And the judge gave that instruction or that advice to the jury. He explained the government's not doing anything wrong. assuming these objections are proper.
Right.
Now, again, maybe the jury said, I don't know what the hell that means, and I'm still going to be affected. If I hear objections, I'm still not hearing it.
Well,
so you can instruct, but you can't necessarily.
Sure.
It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't.
A lot of things have been stricken, and how do you forget them? You've heard them. I mean, they're there. They don't disappear into the ether.
So, Tony Resco of this Gang of Four was there. Lon Monk, who is I'd say Rod's best friend, close friend, in a sense, for most of his adult life.
Right, since college.
Since college.
Pepperdine Law School.
First chief of staff. To Rod Blagojevich.
Right.
And Chris Kelly, a close, big-time fundraiser, roofing contractor,
Yes.
a fundraiser for Rod Blagojevich, and Rod Blagojevich. That was the Gang of Four. That whole thing is out of the case. Now this case is simple.
It's not entirely out. They did bring that up, but they haven't established that, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Right.
and
Shelley Sorosky's going to ask him, maybe it's happened already, that when the indictment goes back to the jury in the jury room, I think he's going to say, I don't want that stuff in there in the indictment. Redacted.
It can't be in there.
So you got to redact all that stuff.
They haven't done that yet. They have not done that yet.
They haven't, but they will.
The original superseding indictment stands. Counts 1, 2, and 4 are out. 4 is a wire fraud that related to Robert, and the case against him was dismissed.
So Paul Meincke, what are the 5 charges? Very simply, explain it to our viewers as simply as the government explained it to the jury.
The Senate seat. He is alleged to have tried to sell it for his own gain.
Rod Blagojevich is alleged.
That's right. The hospital, Children's Memorial. The former governor is accused of having shaken down Pat Magoon, who was the CEO. Give me a campaign contribution, and in return, we will make sure that your pediatric medical rate increase goes up. The tollway. He announced in October of 2008 that there would be a tollway expansion plan. 1.8 that he had the ability to do on his own, apart from the legislature. He wanted
Governor
the governor
had the ability.
Right.
That's called state action.
Right. And in return, he went to Jerry Kozel, one of the government witnesses, head of road builders, the lobby, and said, we want you to come up with $500,000. That's the claim. Come up with that, and if you don't come up with that, then you're not going to get a larger expansion of the tollway.
$6 billion program.
Right. Where am I now? So we've got the racetrack.
Racetrack.
The racetrack is very similar in nature. There was what's called the recapture bill, which would have sent casino money to the racetracks in Illinois. It was first passed in 2006, and this was a simple renewal. He didn't object to it the first time around. This time, he didn't sign it right away. It sat, Governor Blagojevich. He didn't sign the legislation right away. It sat. And there was concern that he was purposely holding it back because he wanted a campaign contribution from John Johnston, owner of Balmoral and Maywood. He had pledged that earlier, did Johnston, but he was holding it back in order to before he was going to sign it, he wanted the money by the end of that following year. That's the ethics legislation change.
Blagojevich wanted the money by the end of the year. And he had received contributions in prior years.
He had a commitment, as he said on the stand.
Had the contributions from
the
Johnson.
Johnsons have given significant money to him before.
Right. So, okay. So that's the Senate deal, the racetrack deal, the Children's Memorial deal, the road builders deal, and one more. Education, funding for a charter school.
Sure.
Charter schools are in this case.
Right.
I've often heard us talk about that on the show.
This is the Chicago Academy. They wanted a new athletic field. They managed to get a $2 million grant pledged to them from the state. I would say, by the way, that the first jury almost convicted him on this. They sent out a note saying that we've reached unanimity on 2 charges. One was lying to the FBI. The second one was the school. But they sat for a couple of days, rethought, came back, and they didn't have the votes to convict on that. In any case, this was to be a $2 million grant that was to go to the school for an athletic field. And the school started going ahead and building the athletic field. They hired contractors.
Chicago Academy?
It's Chicago Academy. It's a former Wright Junior College at Austin, Northwest Side. In Governor Blagojevich's old district, Rahm Emanuel,
District.
5th Congressional District. Rahm Emanuel took over. And
Rahm's district at that time.
it was his district at the time. He announced the grant, and the money didn't show up. And weeks and then months went by, and the money didn't show up. The school administrator
When
who
you say
testified.
he announced the deal? You say he announced the grant?
It was a news conference at which Congressman Emanuel was present, the state superintendent of schools, the governor was not present, and that grant went forward, and there was an expectation it was coming. So it didn't, and they got upset, and the case against Governor Blagojevich is, or the allegation is, that he was holding back on that grant money, stalling it, because he wanted Rahm Emanuel's brother, Ari, the Hollywood agent, to hold a fundraiser for him first. Confused?
No, and so Rod Blagojevich wanted this fundraiser in particular from Ari Emanuel because Ari, Rahm Emanuel's brother, is kind of a talent agent to the stars in Hollywood.
Right.
He knows all these rich people.
Right, and there are big dollar
Hollywood
signs
stars.
there, sure.
So he wanted them to do that.
Right. So he's just slowing the process down.
That's the allegation.
That's the allegation.
But basically, it's a deal.
But the hospital got the money, the school got the athletic field, the racetrack legislation was signed. So none of these were, and this is the heart of the case. The government's case is that you didn't have to complete the action. There was merely the intent. It was an attempt and an intent. And that's...
But intent is not shown by talking about it. So if you show Rod talking about what, as famously, he's become somewhat famous for talking about the Senate seat that he makes the appointment on. So when Barack Obama becomes president in 2008, Barack Obama had been U.S. Senator. That seat is now vacant. By law, the government is charged with making the appointment of the new senator. Rod Blagojevich is talking with his colleagues at various times with John Harris, with Lon Monk, and so forth. I don't remember who's there at the particular time. You may remember when Rod said, I've got this thing, I've got this seat, and it's effing golden. We're not going to say it here on TV.
Right.
But on the tape, when you hear it, he actually says it. You're so used to hearing that deleted when you hear people say it on radio or TV.
Right.
But in the jury room, the jury hears them say the F word.
Yeah.
So Rod says it's effing golden. Rod uses the F word a lot on many of these tapes. And so do other people.
And I'm not giving it up for effing nothing.
Right.
This is a conversation that he has by phone with Doug Schofield. And to your point about just talking about it, the case, in order to demonstrate intent, you got to do an act in furtherance. So he made phone calls, he received phone calls, and he, for instance, scheduled further conversations. Those are the acts in furtherance that, in the government's contention, show that there really was an intent here.
What's the strongest act if you're the government? What do you think you'd point to and say, we acknowledge we have to show an action by the governor, not just talking about it with his colleagues. What's the strongest bit of evidence to show that?
The strongest bit
on
of
the
evidence
Senate seat.
On the Senate seat were the follow-up calls that he made. He's on the phone constantly to Fred Yang, Doug Sosnick, Bill Knapp, political consultants. He's on the phone with Wyma, his
But all those guys,
chief
do
of
they
staff.
count because they're all advisors, they're staff guy? He could say, I'm just talking.
Sure.
Do you think they all count as acts? As opposed to Rod maybe going to Tom Balanoff, who has become sort of an emissary from the president.
That is one of the acts in
Tom
furtherance.
Balanoff
Setting up
is?
the conversation with setting it up. The conversation with Balanoff is one. The conversation with Schofield, I think, amounts for a couple of them. So those are acts in furtherance.
And what's Tom Balanoff is a union boss.
SEIU.
Service Employees
International Union.
Good friend of Barack Obama, right?
Very good.
This whole thing starts in a sense. Barack Obama, was it the evening of the election or before, when Barack Obama Night before, calls Balanoff.
Yeah, he calls Balanoff, and Balanoff doesn't take the call. He doesn't recognize the number, and so there's a voicemail. He punches it up, and it's Barack Obama. Give me a ring. So he calls him back, doesn't get him. And then he goes and he's filling up his car with gas at Dearborn in Congress, and the phone rings, and it's Barack Obama saying essentially that whoever is picked as his replacement, he desires that that person be committed to the people of Illinois and be electable. And so...
And what else does he say to Balanoff? That's it?
That's pretty much it. He doesn't give a name.
When
At
does
least
he-
that's the testimony.
When does he first give a name? How is a name
The names,
communicated from Obama?
the names.
Valerie Jarrett. When does Valerie Jarrett?
Valerie Jarrett is communicated indirectly and then from Rahm Emanuel in a phone call that lists 4 names after Jarrett is out of the picture. So the original.
Isn't it a phone call when Obama says to somebody, I remember this call, that Obama says, you know, Valerie Jarrett, she would like to be a U.S. Senator. I'd like to have her in my administration as
Right.
an advisor. Who
That's
does he
right.
say that to?
I don't remember
I thought
who
it was
said that.
Balanoff.
Maybe it is.
Okay, so if I'm right, and he says that to Balanoff, Balanoff's outside the Obama administration. He's outside the Blagojevich administration. That's an act by Obama, and then Balanoff comes to Blagojevich, either directly or indirectly, communicates to him about Jarrett, right?
Right.
Well, Blagojevich ends up going directly
I'm not
back.
sure how direct.
Okay,
It's all.
We only have a
hints.
minute or two left, but Blagojevich then goes directly, I think, back, maybe not, to Balanoff, talking about how Jarrett, if he appoints her to the Senate, you know, it'd be good if we started this foundation, this 501c organization,
Right.
and Jarrett would benefit as a U.S. Senator. This would be focusing on healthcare, something like that.
Right.
Is that so Balanoff is almost right between Obama and Blagojevich, certainly in action, right? There's an acting
Right.
further in some ways.
Right.
Strong evidence. Trouble with that, it sort of brings Obama into this.
It's not a completed act. None of
Oh,
the.
but it's an attempt. It's enough.
Yeah. Right.
That's all you need.
It's intent and an attempt.
Okay, we're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Paul Meincke, who's ABC 7 reporter. He's been covering the Blagojevich trial, the first one, covering this. You've been there every day?
Yes.
Okay, you know this stuff.
Well,
And
one
in your
would-
view,
Right.
you know the evidence. You're predicting Rod's going to be guilty of several additional counts, right? He's already got lying to the FBI.
Right. Well, but remember that I said at the beginning I was wrong the first time around.
But if he is, he's going to be looking at 8 to 10 years. This is worse than.
Perhaps.
And if
8 to
he is,
10.
it's not going to be a club fed because I think you're outside the sentencing guidelines. There's a point where you cannot go to a nice, cushy place like Oxford, right?
Well, and his potential sentence would be ratcheted up because he took the stand as well. You testify in your own defense that. on the
You think it's
federal
automatic. Some say you have to be shown to be lying. But in any case, you could be looking at 8 to 10 years.
ground. Possibly.
Probably 70, 80% chance that's what he's going to get here, you think?
I don't know that he'll get that much.
Might be 6 years.
It could be.
Not going to be 1 or 2. Right?
Well, George Ryan got 6.5,
Yeah.
and he
And
was
yet,
convicted on
you talk to
20.
Rod at the. We can see him there at the cafeteria. We can exchange thoughts. Talk to him. The man looks like he doesn't have a care in the world, right?
No, he's comfortable. He said that when he first took the stand that he felt liberated.
He could pass a polygraph if he says I'm not guilty.
I
Do
bet
you
he
think
could.
He could.
I bet he
Because
could.
he really believes that.
Oh, he does.
And maybe he's right.
And maybe he
Maybe
is.
this is just politics. Maybe that's all
That's
that happens.
the argument. That's what he's got. That's the point that he's got to get across.
Question is, when are all quid pro quos illegal in politics with government? In other words, Scott Lazar, former U.S. attorney, he said it's easy. Just don't take the money. Somebody offers you money, you don't take it. It's over, right?
And Rod didn't take a dime, is what Sam Adams said at the